Hi friends, it's Nancy. I have with me here my first completed junk journal that I am going to list for sale. I feel pretty confident about this one, so I'm ready. I'm ready to do that. So I showed parts of this before in an earlier video, but this will be a flip through of the completed video. So this is a soft color covered journal. I made the cover from a vintage quilt block. It's a soft cover, and the closure is vintage seam binding. This had actually been in something because you can see the stitch lines, and then somebody removed it from whatever project they had put it in. So because it's an old quilt, it's probably from the 1930s. Looking at this fabric, looking at the batting, so I feel safe saying this is at least 75 years old. It was hand quilted, hand embroidered, hand appliqued. There's definitely some condition issues which really just add to that whole shabby chic feel. Okay, so the inside is new quilter's cotton. So this is sewed together, and I used a zigzag stitch and to put the cover together. This old textile came from a vintage handkerchief, and inside I've got a little tag that I made with a vintage book page. It's gessoed on the back so you can write on it. It's stitched, and this is vintage lace. This is a journal card from a new paper pack, but I used vintage fabric as a tab, some vintage paper on the back for journaling, and I have stitched around it with machine stitching. Scrapbook page is new, but this trim is quite old, so it's a very pale baby pink with some hand crochet, so it's been integrated into crocheted trim, which I've sewn onto the edge. This is a order form from an old Ideals magazine. I've used some washi tape to reinforce it, and this is a tuck spot that I created from a guest check. Here's a tag that I made from some scrap paper, but this is vintage seam binding. You can see it's really starting to fray. This is a tea card from probably the it says 1960 on there. So it's quite yellowed. And this is a little bit of piece of embroidery there on the bottom from a vintage textile. Paper doily. This is paper from player piano roll from the song Oh Danny Boy. So it says I love you. So I've attached it with glue to an old, I think it was from the 40s embroidery transfer. I put the print part inside so that no ink would rub off. And then on the edge I added this fabric ruffle that has hand cross stitches and some handmade crocheted lace. This is from an old stamp album, vintage book. I made these little envelopes, collage envelopes, using primarily an ad from a 1950s Home and Gardens book, I believe. This is some old correspondence. I added a little tab here and a charm, little silver star. Oop. Book page, music manuscript, believe this is line wrapping paper. Here's a little tuck spot here in the corner, and I've included a vintage playing card, and this is a journaling card with that came from a new paper pack, and I put some coffee dyed vintage paper on the back for journaling. Vintage book page. This is a index page. This is just a little card that I've got in a tuck spot here. Writing paper. This ad for the watch is from a 1939 magazine. Vintage book page. This is an envelope. I've got a little card tucked in there. This is on old music paper. It's really nicely yellowed. This is a green card from the 1940s. Vintage wrapping paper. This is an ad from a 1939 magazine, and I've again used these journaling cards from the paper pack, but I glued them to coffee dyed ledger paper and sewed them on. I really like this ad because of the image of the woman in it. You can't see her face, it's hidden behind her big hat, much like the Colonial lady on the front. This is just a little tuck spot. There's some pieces of money. It's marked copyright 1937, so this is from a game called Stock Ticker, and here is a postcard. The postcard's new, but it's an old image. Dictionary page, coffee dyed paper, writing paper, made a little tuck spot here. This is the pattern paper from the envelope from transfers that again have images of the sunbonnet Colonial lady. I made a little collage there at the bottom, and inside I've got this large card, and I've added a little fabric tab and a vintage button. And this is very old embroidery transfer. Again, I glued it upside down so you can see the pale image itself, but it's not going to transfer onto anything. So this is the center of the signature. Here we have another piece, the other side of the writing paper. I've got a vintage card here that's been altered so that you can write on it. This is a little matchbook notebook, so it has some old pieces of textile and applique. It's got a very old piece of doily up there in the corner. Here's another, oops, here's another tuck spot here. Area for writing. This is a coffee dyed envelope. Sorry, gotta move you up a bit. Coffee dyed envelope. I made this a while ago. You probably saw the video with some vintage seam binding. Here's another vintage playing card I've tucked in there. Here's a couple of tags. The tags are made from vintage book paper that's been gessoed, and this is some antique lace, and this is a little sticker that came from the paper pack, and a little tuck spot. So the red rose tea, I thought that was appropriate. We've got a rose and a teapot. This is an image from a book, and it's adhered to wrapping paper. I made a little tuck spot there, pocket I should say, and here is a card made from coffee dyed paper and guest check, some paper doily, and vintage seam binding. Made a little collage using antique lace, some postage stamps, and that's a cigar band. Little envelope with an acetate window. Here's another charm. It's a pink. It's a pink butterfly. Another vintage card. And a little altered paperclip. Here is one of the mason jar tags that I made. So I've adhered it on two sides to make a little tuck spot. And this is a tall tag with an ad that came from a 1939 magazine. And on the back I've just put a folded piece of ledger paper and some vintage, really fraying seam binding. I thought that turned out cute. On this page I've got a little pocket. This was made using a vintage greeting card. And here's a little booklet that I made with collage, and it has a couple pages. And tucks right in there. Another little collage tuck spot with a tag. Another little collage tuck spot with a vintage playing card. It's been altered. And I thought this all matched very nicely with, it's all pinks and yellows. A little tuck spot with a tag. Oops! This has some muslin, coffee dyed muslin, and some lace. Another fabric ruffle. Little tuck spot here, and I've got a little pink heart as a charm on this tab. This is an advertisement from that old magazine. I liked that it was called Petal Tone because there's a real floral look going on here. I intentionally put these pages together so the green and pink call back to one another. This is hand crocheted lace. It's beautiful. And that is Colonial Lady. If you're interested in purchasing this, you can go to my Etsy store. I also have 11 more quilt blocks like this. So if you're interested in purchasing a quilt block so that you can make your own soft cover journal, there's several options available to you, and it's actually really simple. I made this journal's cover by watching Gayle Agostinelli's tutorial that was posted last September. I'll put a link to that as well. So thanks so much for watching, and we will talk to you again soon.